Hello, guys. Welcome back. It's strange listening to me like this, yes? But it's okay, let's give it a try. Today's topic is on current pedagogies in TEL. This will help you in your problem 3. So, let's get started. First of all, in understanding the pedagogies in TEL, we need to understand the alignments in TEL. What do we mean by this? That means in the selection of tools, applications, and environments, it needs to be aligned to your own personal teaching philosophy, or your values or approaches. For example, if you are a student-centered, having a student-centered teaching philosophy, your tools will be very centered on how the students want to learn, the freedom to choose, the freedom to understand, to learn, and to know the material. But if your teaching philosophy is very teacher-centered, then your selection of tools is very instruction-based. It's based on what the teacher would like the students to learn. So it's very opposite. So think about these when you start thinking about choosing your tools for technology. So in selection of tools, we also talk about the use of the tools. And when you talk about the use of the tools, then you can see that it builds on the affordances that is available for the students to use in the classroom. And all these need to be aligned to your teaching philosophy and also your teaching and course objectives, what you want the students to learn at the end of the day. And also, in the learning of the language, the processes involved, it's where we talk about the SLA, the second language acquisition. So it all has to be aligned in the sense that what you intend for your students to learn and pick up, your tools, the digital tools that you selected and use as part of the affordances in the classroom, your students will be able to learn all these things that you want them to learn. Okay? In the alignment of tools, the technology, we have to align it with theories. So I think you have already learned about the different types of learning theories as well as the second language acquisition theories. So let's start with the first one, the very beginning, the behavioral learning framework. As you can see on the slide, it's by Watson and Skinner. You're probably familiar with the Pavlov dog. And also Watson, he's experimented on babies, which means it's really about behavioral change. That means people expect students or the learners to change in their behavior. As you can see, the format or the method, which is really to do with your pedagogy, what you really want students to behave or perform in a way that you expect them to behave, is through practice. So that's why this method or this format is also known as directed practice. That means you teach, you show the example, students practice, and then you evaluate, and then correct them until they get the right behavior or the right performance. And for technology, that's where the technology can come in terms of individual learning. So you have language labs where students go in and practice the language, practice the pronunciation, practice the intonation, even practice grammar exercises. Very much like the tutor type call. That means there's only the program, the student, he learns from the program and practice until it makes perfect. Very close to the kind of approach that we all are familiar with. We present the material, ask the students to practice it, and in the end they produce it in a less controlled environment so that we can see that they have acquired the necessary skill that is a behavior that we want them to have. So if you are using this method, you are really subscribing or using the behavioral learning framework because that's what you want your students to perform or do at the end of the day. The next one is cognitive. I think you have probably also picked this up already. Cognitive is all about focusing on the learning processes in the brain. That means of the individual. What happens inside the brain when a person's learn? And you can acquire this by having repeated exposure. That means using, asking questions, getting students to think about things. So there's a bit more on the thinking. That's why the word cognitive comes in. Or metacognitive. Metacognitive means thinking about thinking. That means, why do you say this? Why do you think in this way? So by doing this, you'll be able to ask the student to focus or think about the way the person is learning. And the format and method obviously is a lot of this using by the tutorial, asking students to giving the inputs, and then also in terms of noticing, right? You ask students to, did you notice this? Can you compare this? Can you see the difference? When a person does that, you are asking the student to notice. And it comes together with the, if you remember the noticing hypothesis that Schmidt talked about, that's the SLA, second language acquisition. So a lot of these focusing on the cognitive side, then you are talking about the learning framework of cognitive thinking. Here, the technology is really all about using all this extensive reading, listening, using all these other tools to help the students to pick up this information. Notice the last word, reference tools, glosses or glossing, putting on caption, putting on enhanced input. You remember those terms? That means using these things to highlight, asking the students to notice what's going on. In that way, the students will learn the language. So by using technology, you can help the students to pick these things up on their own. So we have done with behavioral, and then we just talked about cognitive. We go on to the third learning framework, which is interaction account. You also know this is actually really a SLA, second language acquisition theory, which is interaction, which means students are focused on the interaction or using the interaction to learn the language. Notice the word interaction. Interaction means there is a dialogue, a continued information between one person and another person or many persons. So it's a continual thing, no longer a very controlled one-to-one kind of a single task, but rather, as you can see the format and method, there's a group, there's a task-based interaction, simulation games. All this is a different style or different type of format where the student can learn the language. And obviously, where does technology comes in? Technology in terms of CMC, as you can see on the slide, computer-mediated communication. So either you use synchronous or asynchronous or email, audio, or your WhatsApp or line chat, or even audio-visual conferencing, which is using Skype. These are the things that can allow, or Google Hangout. These are the things that allow the students to have this kind of interaction, this continuous input, output. That means I listen, I reply, the kind of interaction going on. Students will pick up the language or learn the language via this method. And this is what we talk about interaction account, and in terms of using interaction in order to learn the language. Okay, so that's the third learning framework. Let's move to the fourth one. This one is where I think you already know this word, constructivism and skill acquisition. That means the student learn the knowledge actively, constructing it on their own. You see, the role of the teacher is no longer instructing, teaching, but rather allow the students to pick up the language, to learn on their own. The teacher now becomes a coach, someone who provides the scaffolding, provide opportunities for the students to develop the skills on their own. In other words, the students are constructing, making sense of the language on their own. And you can see the method now, or the pedagogy, if you like here, it's project-based, or inquiry-based, or what you're doing right now using problem-based. Problem-based, in fact, is a part of inquiry-based learning. That means the students start finding out on their own, inquiring, asking questions, and getting the information in order to learn and construct the information. Task-based sometimes can be inquiry-based as long as it's not instructed by the teacher. That means the teacher gives the task, but then the students work on the task on their own. But if the teacher keeps on instructing or teaching or telling the students what to do, it is no longer based on constructivism acquisition theory. If you look at the column under technology. So what do we use? We use many kinds of ways in the technology to help students pick up things on their own. So you can use things like allow students to do searches, use the word processing, referencing tools, hyperlinks, all these for them to go and access and learn things on their own. Think of your own learning process now using this prompt base. Aren't you searching for information on your own? Aren't you referring to articles, books? Aren't you also going to hyperlinks, seeking out more information to try to understand what's going on and bring it back to discuss with your friends and your fellow learners, so that you can construct the knowledge together, and then at the end you're also constructing individually on your own. And you can see this is how knowledge is really being constructed. And this constructivism is really something that we are focused on in today's learning processes. This is something that we all learn naturally, if you like, rather than someone telling you or teaching you. But there's also a place for instruction or place for telling. That's only when you ask questions. And when you ask questions, the answer will come from your instructor or the teacher. And there's also that is part of constructivism, because the starting point is not the teacher. The starting point is the student or the learner. So constructivism theory actually began with Jerome Bruner. He was the guy who talked about this at the beginning. And there are three critical points that I think we need to understand about constructivism theory. One, you can see, is the active process where learners connect the new information they want to learn with what they already know. And this is what sometimes we know as readiness. That means I allow you, or I ask you to think about what you already know, and then I ask you to go and seek out the new information, and then you make the connection on your own. Now, research has shown that this makes learning even stronger. And that's why we are using prompt-based learning, if you notice. The next point is knowledge is structured so that it can be easily grasped by the student. We call this a spiral organization. So which means you are learning information or the knowledge by association. That means you're structuring information based on your own understanding. In this way, you can learn it much better instead of it being structured by somebody else or a teacher. The third point is knowledge is designed to facilitate extrapolation and to fill in the gaps. In other words, when you are encountering the new information, these are the gaps. Now, to best illustrate this, I'm going to show you the next slide. Can you see the knowledge, current knowledge that you know is connected with the unknown new knowledge on your right hand side, and then it becomes and forms the new constructed knowledge that you have. Also, this is what we know as readiness. And then we go beyond, because sometimes the new knowledge has holes, that means gaps, things you don't really know or fully understand at this point of time. But because you are trying to fill in the gap, right? You're going to seek information, check out this person, listen to the video, listen to lectures like you're listening to one right now, and also trying to understand not just from one person, but from various sources. And then you're filling up the gap. That becomes the new knowledge that is being constructed with your current knowledge, becomes a new thing, which is going beyond what you already know to a new constructed knowledge. And here is what we talk about, the spiral organization. Spiral organization is really the way your brain seeks or tries to understand it as best as you can. Now, the way you learn it, the way you connect the dots, connect the knowledge is very different from another person. That's why it's called spiral. That means sometimes you go back to it and then you revisit it, you check it again, and then you learn again. Then a few days later or a few months later, you go back to it again, you learn again. So spiraling means it keeps on revolving around the knowledge. You go back, construct, and finally, actually through time, you get better understanding of this subject more and more purely and by your interaction with the subject matter. That's why they allow you, or rather a good learning pedagogy allows you to go back to the information again and again, to build it up more and more, because it's not just one time, nor one phase. It's repetition, not of the same material, but of course, keep building and building and building. So that's why if you notice in problem-based learning, you're learning through resolving problems over and over again, but different kind of problems. But so you're connecting knowledge as best as you can around that problem. Okay, so the next learning framework, which you probably also know if you can see on the slide, is social cultural theory. Who is it? Vygotsky, one of my heroes in learning, because it is talking about social and cultural. That means interacting. Notice that? See the word there? Learning in social contexts through interaction. That means you're interacting with people, interacting now not just with people, right? With machines, with information that is another resource. By doing so, you are learning. You're picking up new information. And so, because this is more focused on social, that means you're picking up from a person's perspective. Now, when you read an article, it's really someone's perspective. When you read a research paper, it's also someone's idea or opinion or researched evidence on his or her idea. That's why in the forum, I ask you all to contribute your ideas, your perspectives. And when you read someone's perspective, it helps you build your knowledge about the same subject matter. So in our forum posting, I want you or encourage you to keep building that information. And this is part of social cultural theory. We learn from another person's perspective, we learn from another person's research, we learn from another person's knowledge. Okay, so as you can see, the format and method is really collaborative or cooperative. You cooperate with one another because each one of you have different kind of information. You collaborate when you start building new information, new ideas on the subject matter. So obviously, the technology that can help us do that is really the online communities of practice, which is really the forum. The forum that you go into now and also previously, these are really online communities of practice where you come in and discuss on a topic. And so there are others like blogs or microblogs or Twitter, very common. People just put information there, you respond, you comment, and then you respond and comment again on the same information. And there you build your understanding of the matter. Okay? So that is learning social cultural theory. Now I'm going to give you a few more almost like demonstrate social cultural theory in this one here. There are three things about social cultural theory. If anybody asks you what is SCT, there are three things. One, internalization. That means there is a developmental process where you as a learner connect the knowledge from an external into your internal. That means your intrapersonal level, where you internalize, where in your maybe quiet moments when you are alone, when you are at home and you're walking back home or taking the bus or the train, you're thinking about what you have just learned or you're thinking about what you have just encountered. That is internalization, when you're what we call sometimes the aha moment. Oh, it was like that. I see how it all makes sense now. That is internalization. That is when you really learn something. You pick up something. So that you can see why this characteristic or this element is so crucial in the learning process or the developmental process of a person learning the knowledge or the learning the language. Second one is the active process. Now, before you actually can internalize new things, you need to have this kind of interaction with others, right? So it's known as the ZPD, which you probably know, zone of proximal development, and has to very much to do with interaction. We have to interact, not just with people. People, you learn things from them. Again, I was said earlier on, you learn from their perspectives, their opinions, their work, their research, their papers, but you also learn from interacting with artifacts or things. In this case, a machine, a computer, or even a paper, or even something else. Even looking at an object, a painting, or even a table, for example. By looking at a table long enough, you probably learn something. So in that sense, we are picking up things. We are interacting. And unless you interact, we cannot move on to the stage of internalization. So the first one was internalization, also perhaps known as self-reflection sometimes. And the second one is interaction. The last one is scaffolding. Scaffolding, it's really about the teacher or someone else, not necessarily only teacher, provides a scaffold. So someone puts something on the web, that is a scaffolding to help you pick up the information. Someone give you a class passage with blanks to fill. That is also scaffolding, helping you to understand the material. Someone gives you additional explanation or illustration. These are all scaffolding. In other words, scaffoldings can refer to many things. Sometimes we talk about multimodal, we call this semiotic resources, things that allows you to pick up the information and to learn the material more deeper, much wider and better. And that is scaffolding. So a teacher, in this case us, we can provide scaffolding for our students, our learners, by giving them, curating them for them so that they can access. Much like this talk here, this mini lecture is also part of scaffolding. Now, the last learning framework is very, very fascinating. Connectivism. All right, that means we learn by creating networks and patterns of relationship. Can you see the diagram on your left-hand side? My learning ecology. We learn through and with and in our context, right? Home, family, people that we know, which is my relationships, the next one. Can you see on the left-hand side? People, existing, newly developed, like you came to RELC, you know us, your tutors, your professors, your lecturers. These are your newly developed relationships whom you can learn from. See, things, objects I mentioned earlier on, whether it's physical or virtual. Then you move on my process. Here is where you think about your own way of learning. So what we call metacognition. How do I learn? How can I learn this better? Do I learn better at night or morning, or can I learn by asking questions, or do I learn by making connections? You have your own process of learning. I have my own. Your friend or your colleague or your classmate has their own learning processes. Only you know what's best for you, so that you can pick up your information as best as you can. Then you have your will, your capability. This is really to do with your motivation. We talk about motivation all the times, right? How to get your students motivated. So it's the will. I want to know, and usually, what motivates you? What makes you want to create your own process of learning? So here, focus, because it's your learning ecology, because it's you. The motivation is higher. It's something that you want to learn, not forced upon you by someone else or your teacher. The next one is my resources on your right hand side. This is really affordances, isn't it? What do I have that I can use to learn from? All kinds of things that I can. So it's really what is available for you. But you can also find new resources. So in this way, you can learn. So can you see all these comes together and becomes your learning ecology? That means your own network, your own way and connectivity, if you like, of the way you want to learn. So what is the format, the method? As you can see, let me just go back a bit. Can you see that what technology is at the heart of distributed cognition and learning? That means how learning is distributed amongst all these other things. Okay. So let's go back to format and method. This learning is really you decide, you create your own, you establish your own learning network is different from another person's own learning network. Whether you like to use email, whether you like to use the forum page, the discussion forum page, or whether you want to use this talk, you want to maybe listen to this lecture over and over again, that's your style. So your own learning network determines how best you can learn. What are the technology that you can use? You see on the right hand side that graphic, there's so many things you can do. Internet, you can use the mobile device, you can go to colleagues, you go to your friends. Maybe you want to learn more on TELL from your friends or your colleagues who are better at TELL. That's what I'm talking about. You source, you seek out, and this makes you more motivated in a sense too, because you are deciding for yourself. So can you see it becomes what we call PLE? Notice the word on the right hand side, personal learning environment. That means how you really decide and use all these technology to access, to learn the information. Now that you have an overview of all the learning theories and the SLA principles, how do we tie them all back to problem 3? Well, as you can see or sense by now, it's not really the tool itself, isn't it? It's the pedagogy, the method, the format, the way you want your students to learn the language in, the learning environment, as it were, or the learning format or the learning steps. So think about that and see how you can use those information, that knowledge, and respond to your HOD, your head of department, with regard to her or him or his request. So it's really about how you teach using the technology, how you teach, not so much of how to use the technology, but rather how you teach first, and then how the technology comes in and help you in the teaching. So this section or this topic on pedagogies is about the learning methods, the learning format, and the way the students learn the language. So think about that, and then tie it together back to the problem issues, the learning issues, and then see how you can respond well together with the other lecture or mini lecture PowerPoint slide that you will listen to. Okay? Stay cool. Bye.